Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well. I'm recording this at noon on Saturday. I am looking forward to my third weekend in a row, my third Saturday in a row, teching a show at the People's Improv Theater tonight after a very tumultuous and busy professional week and personal week that finally have navigated through for those first rays of promising dawn. The other thing I did this week with much less stakes, because I read somewhere or I heard that if you what's good, it's good for your mental health to, when you're going through a stressful situation, to re-engage with things that you enjoyed in your childhood. So that's something I heard from a YouTuber that I like, who's currently dealing with a pretty intense personal situation. So that was something that stuck in my head. So that's something I've been doing this week. And the way I did that, re-engaging with stuff I liked when I was younger, was I played the original Metal Gear Solid from 1998 for the first time, probably since I was in like high school. So this is showing my age a bit. This is coming on like 20 something years. Game holds up fantastically. It's still very fun to play. Totally engaging story. My skills did not. My skills in that game did not stay at the same level that they were. I was also playing on easy when I was younger, but so I dived into to normal. Could I handle it, folks? Yeah, I could. But when I got to the boss battle, when Psycho Mantis reads how well you've been doing in the game, he absolutely roasted me. And still, I enjoyed having something to plug my brain into after this week. And I also, during this week, had this great conversation with a friend of the show, returning guest Ari Vais, the creative brainchild of the San Francisco Bay Area based indie rock band, the Campbell Apartment. And they have a new record out called 510 that is, I think, a excellent distillation of Ari's songwriting and artistic influences. It veers between very rocking pavement-esque sort of 90s indie rock, and then very Beatles-esque pop arrangements. It's an incredible record, and he's back on the show to talk about it. It is available everywhere that you get your music. You can also check out the campbellapartment.bandcamp.com. Bandcamp, as I'm sure a lot of you music aficionado listeners, is a great way to support up-and-coming bands that you love. And if you want to check out this new record, I highly encourage you to check it out on the campbellapartment.bandcamp.com. While we're talking about music and things that we're excited about, as I'm sure you heard me mention on the last week's show, my band Skiplag is playing a big show in New York City, June 7th, at Pianos in the Lower East Side. We are sharing a bill with Hopeless Otis, Suburban Surf Club, and Something About Ghosts. All really great bands, really good buddies of mine that I cannot wait to share a bill with, and I want to sell this show out. So if you are going to be in New York City June 7th, I'm issuing a call. If you can spare some ticket money, I would sincerely appreciate it. We're going to really put on a fantastic show. We're going to entertain you with some pop, punk, and punk rock songs, and I would be thrilled to see your face in the crowd. So if you're listening to this, I hope you can make it. June 7th, Pianos, Skiplag will be playing. And let's get into my chat with Ari of the Campbell Apartment. Before we got on here, when we were setting this up, Ari,
yep.
I mentioned briefly that I went to some concerts in Japan recently, and the way they do concerts there are the only way I want to do concerts forever.
This is what, Screaming Rabid fans?
well, Screaming Rabid fans, number one, but then also ruthless efficiency, like really perfectly timed. Like the show starts when the ticket says there's one opener, the band plays 2 hours, and then you're still back home by 10. I love that.
That's great. Yeah, I heard that about their like public transport, but it's good to know. It's sort of all around cultural punctuality. That's helpful.
Yeah, and like they actually plan for when, because the trains do shut down eventually, but all the shows end before that, or at least the two shows I went to, and especially the one was in like a big convention center, so it was
Hmm.
all general admission, but it was like sectioned off general admission, and people apologized for stepping on me on me.
Oh, that's great. I was driving Uber the other day, and there were some Japanese businessmen, and they were asking what the perception is of Japanese people. So I said like just really good manners.
Yes, overwhelmingly positive. That would have been my answer.
That sounds great.
And I don't know if you do this, but I don't know how much traveling you've done internationally, but do you specify the city you're from or the state you're from when people ask you
I
overseas
don't
where
even
you're from?
specify that I'm from the States. I specify that I'm from Canada or Britain. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, right now especially. Like I make a point when people ask, I say New York City because I feel like most of the world will understand. Oh, okay, New York City. So probably not on board with the guy.
And also like knows my culture because it's such a global city. It's like not a U.S. city. It's like the capital of the world, I think, in some
Oh,
ways.
one
So
one
people are
hundred
like, "Oh, New
percent.
York." So you're on board with what where I'm from because you must know Afghani culture because my guys sells whatever kaftans on 32nd Street or whatever it might be. So I love that
Yeah,
about New York.
exactly.
I kind of don't really say. I just say I'm from all over because I really am. I don't know if I'm from New York or San Francisco or London or Russia or what, which is why I called the album 510 to remind myself.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that because I thought 510 was an area code at first.
Well, it is. It's Oakland, and I moved from San Francisco to the East Bay, no, in 2018, and like because of my personal situation, I'm here for 12 more years, and
Uh-huh.
so I'm just embracing it as home, and I quite like the Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, like the East Bay area is proud, and pretty
Hmm.
rocking. It's sort of like Brooklyn or Jersey City to Manhattan, where like people are proud to be from there because they kind of maybe got pushed out of where they were living, and now it's this enclave of artists and like the underdog who's well, I don't know, like more tight, I guess, than the big city of SF.
I could see that. Like so much I feel like the East Bay by comparison has like more like kind of punk rock working class sort of ethos, like Rancid come out of the Bay Area. Some one of my favorite rappers is from the Bay Area, the East Bay
Oh, which
specifically.
one?
So MC Lars,
Who?
he's a he did the show a few years ago, but I was a fan of his for years before I got to meet him. And he does like nerdcore rap, and he's a lot of his stuff is like filled with like literary references to classic literature. Great
Cool.
dude, I love
That
him,
is
and
really cool.
his flow is incredible. Like listening to his raps is like very satisfying because it's like very impactful, like the cadence to the music.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know Rancid was from the East Bay.
So
I
one thing
thought
I
all
did
that
want to
music was
ask
like in
ask you because you did
Orange
allude
County,
to it
but
recently.
I don't
You
know.
were
I know Green
saying
Day are
that
from
you're
Berkeley
not
and still live there.
from, you don't feel like you're from any one particular place. Um, is there a place in your like either heritage or like your history of living places that you most identify with?
Well, it's funny because I'm trying not to say I'm from the USA when I'm overseas, but if I'm from Moscow, which I suppose I am, that's even more of a like I'm from nowhere, nowhere. You know, I guess I don't know. I don't know what to say because people don't know what East Bay is. They know San Francisco if I'm far away from
Right.
home, and I don't really feel like that's home. Um, London, I guess, or New York, if I in my heart of hearts. But the
Uh-huh.
fact that I've been in the East Bay since 2018, and I will be till my kids start college for the next 12 years,
Hmm.
uh, makes this home. I can't. I'll have been here for so long, and I've already been here like 7 years, I guess. That
Hmm.
I enjoy it. It's like 10 degrees warmer than SF, and like you said, it's got a punk rock ethos, and not everybody's in tech making hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's still more indie underground DIY and working class, and like now that the Oakland days have left, even more like stick togetherness. And it's nice like to it's good that people are in tech, and I respect and find it fascinating the innovations that have happened throughout my life. But it's a bit oppressive to live in a place where that's all is the conversation. So if you're a stand-up comedian or you're musician, people in tech are like, "How's that going? How do you monetize it?" And
Right.
in the East Bay, they don't say monetize. They probably don't even know that expression. I hope not.
Yeah, there's just there's more like regular people. You could have like an actual human conversation instead of a jargon conversation, like circling back and yada, all of that.
Yeah, there's so many expressions that only exist in that world of like profit-driven world. And at the circles I run around in San Francisco, like I'm doing a stand-up show in North Beach on Sunday, and on Monday a reunion gig at Kilowatt in the Mission. The circles I run in there are, artist circles as well. But
Right.
I'm just saying, in the East Bay, you're more likely to just kind of bump into somebody who's in our boat than somebody who's in tech, just at the DMV or whatever. So I
Hmm.
enjoy that.
Oh, for sure. Like I get far much more out of conversations with people like you, and I feel like I grow more as a person than whenever I'm in like the real world, in like my corporate world.
Mm, yeah,
uh, like I actually feel like I when I speak that we're talking about real things, and my imposter syndrome doesn't like pop up, and I feel like I'm pretending to be an adult, you know?
yeah, exactly. Um, and in that world, there are just so many expressions. I can't even think of them because they're so off-putting that unless you're in that world, you wouldn't necessarily know. And monetize is
Hmm.
one of them, but they're just endless. There's more and more each day, and
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to like unflex my brain. Although I could use a job by now, I make an album every time I'm made redundant, and so that's how come I got two records out in 2 years instead of the usual one every 3 years. But having said that, I wouldn't say no to a job, you corporate monsters. I'm still good at sales. Well, now I've done it.
uh the the eternal struggle. Like I always think of this one song by a band I really like called Rebellion versus the Alarm Clock, and that is sort of like the balancing act that I've put on in my this period of my life, is how do I continue to like be defined of the things of society I don't like, but also navigate myself out of uh, keep myself out of off the streets, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah, right, right. Yeah,
So two records in 2 years. So let's, because it has been 2 years since you were on the show last, Ari. So I kind of want to catch up with you of what's been going on during this time. So we're here to talk about the Campbell Apartments' newest record, 510, which I'm glad you said it because I originally thought it was 510. Um,
I call it 510, 510.
so I kind of want to go through what's been going on leading up to this next record. So it sounds like professionally things took a swerve, and you had one record before this newest one uh, called Under the Influence of Love. So maybe let's talk about that first, because I want to I'm curious what goes into such a massive amount of creative output. Two records and full length records in such in 2 years.
Well, the Beatles did two a year, but then they didn't have any other jobs. And but yeah, let's chat about it.
So so take me through, I guess, the let's start with Under the Influence of Love, which I had gone back and listened to and really enjoyed. I feel like Under the Influence of Love and 510 are kind of the two sides of your stylistic artistic persona. Like I feel like Under the Influence of Love is a lot more rocking, and 510 I feel like there's a lot more of that introspection, kind of more Beatles-esque pop side on that record.
Yeah. Under the Influence of Love was released in January of 2024, and 510 came out in February. So pretty, or yeah, in February 28th. So there's like 11 months, or what is it, 13 months between them, which was really cool. And at the time that we were doing, so I was made like redundant in March of 2023, 23, yeah. And I had like the remainder of 2023. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
find anything, and my producer, Chris Dunn, was in the same boat. He was like a director of engineering, and like maybe we're considered too old to be a hungry sales dog in a startup tech director of engineering because they
Sure.
want like other 20-year-old kids. I don't know, but we were both happy to make a record, and he's like the George Martin to my Lennon McCartney or whatever. He just knows
Right.
what I'm looking for. He already had the idea at the same time, and then he makes it happen like within seconds, so that my raging ADHD isn't like, God, when. And even still, I'll sort of give him other ideas I'm having about other songs we're working on. He's like, dude, he says, dude, he calls everybody dude. Let me just do this thing. But he never gets arsy with me about it. So yeah, well, and so Under the Influence of Love was like sort of a concept album from my perspective because I was thinking 2024 and sort of the entirety of it, if the record came out in January, would be a bad, scary year that people needed like a dose of love and positivity. And
Right.
really, it was 2025. I sort of, and so that album, I was like, some rules, no sad songs. And there's like, well, my ex bass player who lives in Paris now, he had 4 songs in the album, and 2 of them were sad. And then I had one song called Cheryl Noble, which is also pretty sad, but it was also like set to a disco beat with a Rhodes
Right.
piano. So I like contrasting things. Like if people are feeling like dancing, and then they're like, "Wait a minute, this is about a end of a marriage," and I like that. It's like chewy. It's like a novel. It's not blunt. Like be happy, be sad. I'm punching up, man. And
Yeah, no,
so
totally.
and yeah, like Sand and Glue rocks, and Only One Night rocks. But I didn't really. Once I was writing the songs, I didn't really think of any formula. And like even in a happy song like "I'm Looking Through You" by the
Mm-hmm.
Beatles, there's a minor chord. So when I give myself rules like no minor chords, a good pop song will have them, and it doesn't have to be a sad song at all.
Right.
It's just a great transitional chord. It's just a great chord, um, unless it's all minor chords, and then of course it's sad. And so
Yes.
that album was not necessarily because I never have a concept normally when making a record, and that one kind of did. I was just trying to cheer people up and cheer myself up and just be happy. And like "Fun in the Sun" is almost goofy.
Uh-huh.
It like repeats that refrain "Fun in the Sun" a million times, and there's like Beach Boy harmonies all over the place that Chris Dunn sang while I slept, and it's just a beach song. It's like a driving summer song without any indie angst or any really other angles, just happiness. And then I was made redundant again um, in August of last year, and so was Chris. So we were like, well, let's make a record. This is our this is kind of our pattern. And this was cool because I said to the record label, he was like, you can release it, la 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 la. And the first date of release was February 28th, and I was like, oh, I want that one because I'm so impatient. Even that seemed like light years away. And so
Yeah.
we started like after Labor Day, and we submitted it to the record label by the end of 2024, which was like when they needed it by. So it was kind of not under the gun, but we worked long days and multiple times a week. And like the rest of the time, I was either being a dad or job hunting or both. Um,
Right.
and so that I've never written that fast, and I loved it. It's like once you know what you're doing, and then you don't. Um, there was a woman in Howard Stern, and like her last name, her stage name was like XLX or something, and her first name was a normal female first name.
Mm-hmm. Charlie
Anyway,
XCX?
huh?
Charlie XCX?
Yeah. And I don't know what kind of music she makes, or sadly, I don't know anything about anything. I've been listening to a lot of Mozart though.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but she was saying like writing, allegro, rapido is like flattering because you're not gonna. paint too much. When the painting is done, it's just done. You're not going to be like, you don't have time. There's no reason. And it's like free writing. It's like free association or stream of consciousness almost, where it's like more beautiful and more honest for the lack of craftsmanship. Like these songs aren't really wrought, carefully wrought like my songs tend to be.
Hmm.
And I think they're the better for it. Like, one song is about a barista here in Alameda that it's pretty. And I was like sitting there job hunting, and I was like, and her name was Tallulah, and I was like, well, that's a great name. That needs a song. And then another one, I just had like Alone in the Bar, the last song. I just had these little couplets, and these four chords in the main part, because there's like an intro and an outro in the main part. I've had in
Hmm.
my head for like years and years, maybe decades, and I never actually could. I'm so lazy. I never picked up the guitar and figured out what the four chords were, which I did immediately when I picked
Uh-huh.
up the guitar. And then like these little couplets, I just had so many of them that Chris Dunn, the producer, was like, let's edit out a quarter of these couplets because they're just word salad, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed them. But we like edited it to make the song under 4 minutes. And then my friend Karen and I were having lunch or having a coffee, and she was like, I like the way you measure time by quirky things like garbage day, Thursdays, and like, instead of a watch or a clock.
Yeah.
And we started like bantering what other ways. And then I also saw like somewhere that 30,000 days is kind of what you're on average what you get when going around this marble. So I was like, but then the music quickly came to me because it was time to go record. Like, I'll
Yeah.
have girls, for example, my kids are 6, and by the time I put them to bed and do bedtime stories and whatnot, I'm just too tired. And yet the recording session's coming up the next morning, like not late morning. And so I'll get up and get them ready for school. They're off to school by 8:30. I'm back home. The session is at like 9, and I'll just be like, bloody hell! I've got 30,000 days, and how many months is that, and how many weeks is that, and just quickly, man. And then I was like, ooh, and it's on a napkin. There's like drawings instead of words or whatever. And then Chris will interpret it, and we'll kind of build it together from that skeleton once in the
Yeah.
studio. And by the end of the day, it's more or less a completed pop song because harmonies. I've been not practicing, but I'm so into harmonies, and this album has a lot of harmonies. So we just like
Yeah, it does.
we would nail those. High harmonies are quite intuitive. I can do them without mapping them out first, but low harmonies aren't. And like I saw something with Paul McCartney where somebody talking about Paul McCartney, somebody on Stern as well. I just got Sirius XM after like holding out since he left regular radio, and I'm really enjoying it. Who was saying that Paul McCartney will like go to the piano and map out like the main melody and the low harmony of that, and then sing that on the record. And so we did that, and before I knew Paul did it that way. Um, and then like I did a drop D tuning for one song because I'm like my two angry songs, Biter and Grudge, and just kind of free associated what was happening with me, but without being literal about it.
Right.
Um, yeah, Words with Birds, arguably the best song on the album, is like also about a personal situation of mine, but Words with Birds is supposed to be like Words with Friends, and
Uh-huh.
Birds like dating apps like Birds, British Birds, and it's kind
Oh,
of
right.
what I do when the kids aren't around, and it's kind of like measuring time by when they come back to me. Um,
Uh-huh.
Anyway, and so, and then like, what's the song? What's going on when I go? Dogs can see in the dark, and octopuses have 3 hearts. I was watching the Animal Channel, and I was like, octopuses have 3 hearts, and dogs can see in the dark. All right, I need a song right away. I'm going to record in a few minutes.
Uh-huh.
So it was just a liberating way to make an album. I just loved it. Self-imposed deadline, yes, but what a great way. It's like creative writing class. The next day you'll read your little short story to the kids in the class, and they'll critique it. So you can't be embarrassing yourself. You got to, but you wouldn't write it until the night before. And so in a burst of
Sure.
inspiration and having your back up against the wall, something like a diamond comes out of the rough.
Yeah, kind of like how I feel like I did my best essay work in college the night before it was due. There was something to that. So to kind of respond to some of these so Charlie XCX, I would call her like dance pop or like electronic pop, like vaguely EDM is. She is more or less one section of what pop music sounds like nowadays, which
Uh-huh.
I've learned from being because I gotta keep my ear to the railroad track of what the kids are up to.
That's great.
But I've like listened to interviews with her, and she's hosted Saturday Night Live. Like she's pretty
Oh,
multi talented.
yeah, she's
Um,
cool. I liked her for the
but
radio.
yeah, but she just like cranks out these like straightforward like banger pop songs relatively quickly. Like one of my favorite songs she does. And I think Sabrina Carpenter, another great pop singer, her big hit Espresso, she said she wrote in like 15 minutes also. Charlie XCX has said like, oh, it just came to me in like 15 minutes. And there's something to like I do love the image of like a tortured composer like just bent over like with the quill just like scribbling out notes and movements. Like I appreciate the craftsmanship of that. I also have had this experience a few times of like something I really enjoy. Like I'll just like really be like struggling with it for a long time, and then like instantly, like the last piece falls into place in like 15 minutes, and I don't know what that is. Like I would love to read like a study about that because there has to be some sort of like scientific explanation for when those sparks of creativity happen. Like I could just see like the neural pathways of the brain just like exploding
Yeah.
like a constellation or
And
like
not
a
everybody
shooting
is a
star.
creator, so like those of us that make stuff, not to be snobby about it, but not everybody is an oil painter or stand-up comedian, like is a writer or a
Yeah.
composer. Most people aren't. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any fans whatsoever because they'd be trying to get their own fans. So the conversation can be had. It's an interesting neurological sort of thought process or idea to ponder, to chew upon, because I don't know if there's like a black and white answer. I think a part of it, and by the way, can you edit in that I knew exactly who Charlie XCX was and I told you who she was?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say at the end, like despite what you heard, he was actually telling me about Charlie XCX.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, so like a part of it, I think, we do our best work for the term paper the night before, but there's no point of reference because we procrastinated. And what
Right.
would it have been like if we take, written in bits and bobs and like edited and went over it and made it just shiny? And I don't know. I've always been too lazy and it just, I can't even sit down with a guitar or piano unless it's a rehearsal like tonight or a gig like a week from tonight or writing this album, which I had no choice. And it was really nice to be forced to sit down at the piano or have a guitar in my hands because, like, what am I going to show up at Chris Dunn's house with nothing? That's not an option. There's somebody else involved now. Um, so part of it is like just having no choice. And so our best, what's inside us, comes out without overthinking anything because there's no time left. And I think
Right.
part of it is confidence as well. It's sort of like knowing, like, I've got a stand-up show on Sunday, and I've written like a roadmap of the jokes, but I haven't practiced it or anything. And I
Hmm.
will right before the show, or or whatever. I will maybe the night before
Right.
on Saturday. But so part of it is a confidence of having done something for so long. And with comedy, I can't say that. I know you can, but with music, I can. That like having that self-imposed deadline, just having the autumn months, sort of September, October, November, December was already like final mixes and mastering. Anyway,
Yeah.
having just such a short time to make an LP, you gotta you gotta know in your heart of hearts that you'll be fine, even as you compose it the hour before you go into the studio. Just like Charlie XCX, like, we know what we're doing, and it might even be the better for it if it's not just buffed, you know.
No,
Um,
totally. And I think part of what can get you there, and because this is something I think about as well, because they kind of exist in the same universe, I think. And the way you get to those like flashes of synapses, flashes of just pure it all coming together, because it has to sometimes. What what leads up to that is like craft and like the 10,000 hours, the Malcolm Gladwell thing, like the I think about like tradesmen, like electricians or like blacksmiths. Like I think of blacksmiths a lot when I write songs. Like you just don't create a great pot or a piece of metalwork the first time. There's you got to bang a bunch of really hot metal to get to that one piece that eventually is the culmination of all that. So I
Hmm.
feel like there's two sides of that, and I feel like non-creative people, I think, maybe relate more to that, because most people can relate to the I had I woke up early. I had a lot to slog through. Whatever the job is, there's always some slog to get through. And then I put it down and I felt accomplished.
Yeah, like all the emails that came in the overnight. And yeah, I think everybody can relate, whether they're creative or not, because you produce whatever it is you produce when you have to. And then if you're a
Yes.
professional, if you're not like brand new at it, you can leave it till the last minute, and you know you'll get it right. Um, and I always kind of, this was subconscious. I didn't even make the connection, but I've always said to myself, like I could write a good song in 5 minutes if my job was just to write songs, like in the Brill Building, or like Lou Reed had to do before he was Lou Reed, just
Uh
churned
huh.
out songs and then clock out at 5 o'clock, turned in what he did,
Yeah.
And I was like, if I had that job at the Brill Building, if somebody was waiting for a song every 5 minutes, boom, I can do it in my sleep. And sure enough, I put myself to the test, and and I can, it's cool. Um, there is no such Brill Building, or what's the place in Tottenham Court Road? Tin Pan Alley. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing of yesteryear. But I just like I know when I sit down with a guitar, something really hooky comes to me pretty much immediately. And I was like, what if I didn't like improve on those little chestnuts? What if I just went with them instead of trying hard to make sure kids can't figure out what I'm doing? Like how to play it. And I've always done this. So I use a K post to make it a little bit hard, but ah, it wasn't. They're not like demented chord changes with a total lack of pattern. I still have a lack of pattern because I don't think that way. My right side of the brain or left, whichever one is logical, is like just
Mm-hmm.
one blob, and then the other one is very many wrinkles and this pulsating thing, and then the other one's like bleh, um, whatever. But like what you said about composing and being like angst and chiseling away, it doesn't sound fun, and it's supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
fun. So,
Yes.
like, I put myself to the test, and I sat down, and I had to have something. Like, I would go through voice memos, and I was like, "Great, it's an idea I never looked back on, but it's an idea. It's going on the album. I need it. I need it. I don't have. I have 5 minutes, and like that happened with 4 songs.
Uh
One was just like life on an oil rig, and so I asked ChatGPT, "What is life like on an oil rig?" And I just put that in the words. you know, of course, I like massaged them to be poetry, but still, I don't know. I
of
want
course.
one, and then I did know. And it's kind of a song about isolation, but it's cool to arrive at
Yeah.
like songs about without even knowing myself, because you're starting out with just an idea, like title first, "Life on an Oil Rig," and then it's like, oh, it's about not having anybody in your life, and that's not the case for me anymore. But when it was, I just had to like you know, write about it without being obvious, and then know that that'll change too. This too shall change, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a coping mechanism, perhaps. But
Yeah.
it was just fun, like you said, to do it workman style. Like clocking in at work every morning and just song. Okay, lunchtime song. I
Mm-hmm.
love that, and I wish like I was under contract to make 2 albums a year for the rest of my life, because then I would just play my instruments, get better, and just have all these like melodic ideas take shape instead of just like I know I can do it next album. So
Right. No, there's something about having the like, or especially the expectations of your producer. One part of one of the songs off of 510 I want to ask about, and where that came from. Like we talk about churning out the about like just song. So I believe it's Tallulah Says. So this is very like super hooky, rocking like indie song about barista, like you're saying. And then it has this like Eddie Van Halen style like solo that comes like careening in. So where did that come where did that come from? Was that in the studio, or was that like composed and thought out?
well, that's an interesting question because and like Tallulah Says, it's only a minute long. All the lyrics are things Tallulah said. Like, is room for cream? She likes my mix of Motown songs. I'll listen with intent to I Can Boogie. Yes, sir, I can boogie. You know that song? A Boogie All Night Long by these two
Yeah.
Spanish women. I love that song. And so I didn't need to think of the lyrics. I was like, what has she said back and forth that wasn't just like how much I owe? And those are the things. But as far as the solo, and I was just like, I can boogie till the end. Yeah, I wanted to drop one of those, and then I was like, I need a solo like Eddie Van Halen, like you said. And Chris Dunn, the reason I know him is he plays in a band called Stone Dog, and he's a sick
Uh-huh.
guitar player, but he kind of only interested in guitar playing if he can do what he does, which is like whammy bar. And so I was like, Chris, can you do your thing and just empty out the tank? Just do all your things that you do. And he was like, oh, yeah, if you go away, I can do it. Like, not if you're watching. And so he did. So now I'm not sure. He's sitting in on this gig on Monday because I had finger surgery. But after that, he's going to go back to, we're going to go back to being just a three piece. So I'm not sure how to handle that song because I don't, I don't know how to do that, but I guess I can learn. Um, but yeah, I just thought, I was like, I don't know any more words. I don't have any more ideas. It's time to record solo, you know? And it's still like a
Right,
minute
right.
45 or whatever. It's still a really short song, but solo is always a great way to like make a song not 30 seconds, but a minute and change. And then I'm happy with the length.
Hmm.
So yeah, that wasn't me.
Uh,
Oh, but the reason I said it's a good question is he and I have always had a debate as to whether or not, because he pre-writes his solos, and I just
uh-huh.
know the key it's in. Sometimes I don't, which is a shame. But and then I just kind of wail away in the key that it's in, knowing the scale, but not pre-composing it. I just can't imagine that kind of whatever cerebral commitment. And so we were arguing as to whether Jay Mascis, Dinosaur Jr., the king
Yes.
of solos, whether he pre-writes them or if he just wails. And he said he must pre-write those things, and I was like, no, they just sound really like improvised. And I know a guy in Amherst, Mass, that I used to work with at a school who
Hmm.
knows Jay pretty well, and so I asked him on Facebook. I was like, does Jay write those things in advance, or is he just solo? Is he just wailing away? And Kurt said that he doesn't pre-write them, but they always start on the same note, and from there he wails. And I was like, how interesting is that? Because he has so many records, and I haven't actually gone back to see what note that is, but really interesting, how people go about their craft or their creative process, especially people you like.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's always just like some wisdom to glean, like load into your own like creative machine. I Man, when it comes to solos, like I might take for like several months to come up with like the most like basic simple like da na 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 da na na. But if I can like come up with a second part that like goes past the 12th fret, like, and I know where all the notes are, I feel so excited. I feel like, all right, I can do lead guitar and melodies, because
Hmm.
that's my process, is like figuring out all those like little uh notey riffy bits, because I can put some chords together and make you feel something. But that's the next step of my process.
And I wonder if that's not a guitar part as opposed to a guitar solo, because it's like dun 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 dun. That's the hook, whatever
Yeah,
that's on Day Tripper. Um,
yeah, day tripper.
but it's not a solo, and yet it's an essential guitar part. That's an essential part of the song. It's like the hook, or one of them. And so I
Yes,
wonder if what you're talking about is like like a really important part of the structure of the song, as opposed to just bending strings and going above the 12th fret, but you still know the notes you're playing and why. And so I wonder if
yes,
that's not a guitar part as opposed to a solo. But whatever, like it's a lead, and that can be a
yeah,
guitar part or a solo.
yeah. To
So
me, a guitar solo is anytime the guitar is playing notes and no singing's happening. I have a very simplistic view of it. But now that I think about it, maybe it would be considered more of a part. The other thing I'd love to ask you about, since we're currently in the middle of it, I imagine this song probably was inspired by a little more recently, but Winter 2028.
yeah,
I listened to that. I was listening to that on the train today. I was like, oh, I gotta get there. I gotta get to that
yeah,
intro.
yeah. Well, speaking of like hooks and melodic parts that are not the solo but maybe the lead, because like in "And Your Bird Can Sing," there's no singing when they go da 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 dun dun blah dum ba da 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 bum. But that's not a solo. Maybe it is a solo. I don't know. But nobody's singing, and that's the guitar line, the big guitar line of
Yeah.
that song. Perhaps what's the best thing about the song. But anyway, yeah. So this was before. This is the night of the election or soon after, where I was like, not today, Satan. It's just like la la
Right,
la
right.
la la, and the day before the inauguration, the 19th of January, I was just like, I'm not gonna. I like didn't delete my BBC and New York Times and Associated Press apps on my phone. I just stopped touching them, and I was
Right.
just like, ew. I don't want anybody to rattle me again. I already that happened. I was a younger man. It was sucked. It sucked, and I'm sure it's like so much worse now. So my protest is like blissful ignorance. I just read so many more novels, and I'm like binge watching The Sopranos and just like everything but the news. I used to measure
Hmm.
time by NPR start of the hour every hour. I'd be like, well, it's 3 o'clock, NPR. And
Hmm.
they'd run through the top headlines and then the local top headlines, and I haven't done that since the day before the inauguration. It's really nice and liberating. But yeah, that's another title for a song, which is another thing I've never done is title for songs. And like when I go, isn't it ironic? Don't you think? It was sort of my ploy to meet Alanis, who lives around nearby in the East Bay in Lafayette. And I was like, no, I'm single, and she's a mom. Maybe she's a single mom. I don't know. Unhappily married. Whatever. But like, it's a shout out because what I say before that, like, no more Jill Stein dealing Earth its fatal blow. That is ironic because they're not like
Yeah.
extreme far right, but they ushered them in. And her song, it doesn't have ironic bits, but I'm not like nah nah. I'm more
Uh-huh.
just like, yeah, isn't it's just more of a tip of the hat. Uh, but like the melodic hook, doo 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 doo. I was in the studio and I was like, ooh, doo doo doo. And so Chris was like, "Do you want a thing the Cars would have done, like a wonky, synthy thing?" And I was
Yeah,
like,
the
"Yeah."
synthy part.
And so he plugged in a synthesizer that did that sound like the Cars, and we figured out exactly what. And so Weezery, but I was just like, we nailed that in seconds. And then I
Hmm.
wrote the melody and the words using that melody. Wake me up in 2028. In my deep state, I will hibernate. And a no more Nancy getting rid of Joe. That had low harmonies. So by that time, like the harmonies and the call and response stuff allows you to just finish the song. And the words. And then I kind of like transitioned to there's no gunplay underneath the sea. And now we're like under the sea, just sitting out the next 4 years. And there's the college under the sea, and there's no gunplay or nor corporate greed under the sea, and then we'll swim out and rebuild the planet up and down. We're the ones who voted for the clown or that clown, and for those that came with me, there's a lack of greed under the sea. So I'm saying like we'll rebuild the planet up and down for the ones who voted for that clown, and the ones who came with me. In other words, for everybody. You
Yeah.
but I didn't pre-plan those words. They just it was another one of those things where it's like coffee, fuck breakfast, time to get on my bike and go to Chris's place. The kids are in
Yeah.
school, and we'll figure it out. I just do 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 do. That was really nothing except the title, and then I just had that melodic hook, and he quickly made it happen on the synth, and the rest just wrote itself.
Yeah. Just kind of like probably some feelings that have been swirling around since we dived back into this again.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
That's
the song I had called "I Know What I've Done" 2 albums ago on the record "Curmudgeon" was before he was elected the first time around when he was mocking that disabled New York Times journalist. And that one is
yeah.
like Murder Folk. It's like a scary ass, you know, a
Yeah.
song I don't even want to be out there because I don't want to be disappeared. And
Sure.
this
It's like
song,
very outsidery, like outsider art, that song.
yeah, I mean, there's foot stomps and acoustic guitar and like chilling words about it, some mixed up kid who got him, not just in the ear.
Yeah.
Uh, and now I'm a dad, and now it's already happened, and I'm so much older, and it's so much worse that
Hmm.
this is my way to say, ugh, the hell, you know, let's undo all this, and hopefully the pendulum swings. Whoa, like the radical extreme in 4 years, because this is an extreme swing of the pendulum in some nutty
Sure.
direction we've never even been in. So hopefully there's a correction, and then wake me up then.
Yeah, exactly. I've decided I'm treating this next 4 years like a prison term. So I'm like I'm still got my ear to the because I feel a responsibility to know what's going on. But I'm exercising a lot and reading a lot, and I'm reading a lot of books, trying to understand some things. Uh,
It,
if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
it's just so upsetting. And like when I read baseball news because I love the MLB, and it's like nonpartisan, and it's not
Hmm.
ageist, not age specific,
Yeah.
not even gender specific. It's just the great old pastime. It's like slow and beautiful and American and whatever. But on my Feedly, underneath MLB news, I can sometimes I'll get a sneak peek of like, oh, he's blowing up Greenland and putting tar on the bird, on the feathered, like whatever. Just like, oh,
Sure.
and I'm like, if I scroll more, then he'll be, executing refugees that are illegal and, you know, dissolving the Department of Education. It's just an endless pit of horror. And so, like,
Yes.
rather than going down that rabbit hole, I feel responsible. And some people on Facebook even said like white privilege or some, and I'm like, that's the reason we have Trump, is that kind of saying, you saying that to me, by the way, that kind of finger waggery. But I have black
Hmm.
friends that posted on Facebook like, yeah, I'm also not paying attention to the news because like, ugh, so it's not really white privilege. It's more just like blissful, not blissful, but just a coping mechanism. Um, and I'm not totally shutting off external inputs and whatever data, because I did tell
Hmm.
you about Charlie XCX. That's a
Yeah.
callback in stand-up comedy, as you know.
No, yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, also similarly, what I've been kind of thinking about over the course of this conversation is like the two sides, the two like halves of the artist brain. There's the sort of like shake the fist at the ills of society, of which many are being wrought as we speak. But then also, not too dissimilar to Under the Influence of Love, there's also the side that I think is equally as valid as the the release valve, the pleasant momentary distraction. And I go between both of those, and especially go between both of those on this podcast a lot, because that's kind of my whole thing at Awesome and Disaster.
Yeah,
So I I I I I relate to that, and I'm also in a place where I can less is probably going to affect me right away of what they're doing right now. And when I say they, I'm also including Elon in that. Um, but similarly, like I view my strength as more of like the pleasant distraction, because I know people that are really good at punching up and like social commentary and are really well learned. I'm gonna let them do that, and then I'll be the na 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 guy, if that makes any
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean, I think in the darkest times, like in the '80s with Reagan, and this is so much worse. Husker Du existed, and like it's a great time for punk rock or stand-up comedy. And
Yeah.
when Obama was president, it wasn't that fun. The stand-up comics didn't have that much. It wasn't that funny. It wasn't super fucked up. And
Hmm.
like the punk rock didn't. It was a good time to go to the beach with a good book and just be proud to be somebody with an education being represented by an intelligent, articulate man. Uh,
Yeah.
and like in the worst possible times is a good time. Like in Walnut Creek here next door to where I live, there's protests outside of Tesla dealerships, and I like that.
Hmm.
I don't, as anybody who has not already gotten one before Musk melted down with the Hitler salute and whatever, I would get rid of it and get a different electric car. But you can't like be angry at those people. But the dealerships that are selling to people now, yeah, you can be angry. Uh, so
Yeah.
that's
It's
sort
kind of
of
like you should
protest
know
on my
better.
board. Yeah, you should care. You should care enough not to buy that thing. You know,
Yes.
somebody I
Totally.
know was like, "Well, do you listen to Wagner?" And I'm like, "I listen to Wagner, but not every day, because like you drive your Tesla all day, every day, presumably.
Right.
So that's not a great analogy. Um, uh, but yeah, like under the influence of love, I was trying to nudge people towards the light and the more levity and just
Hmm.
happiness. And
Yeah.
here, well, kind of like between awesome and disaster, I'm trying to paint a picture that's not just doom and gloom, even though if you turn on the news, it's very much that. But I don't want to be a
Yes.
reflection of like current events. Even in stand up comedy, I no longer reference current events as part of my stand up, like
Hmm.
Letterman's or any opening monologue of those guys, because I don't watch the news anymore. And like, it's easier, it's easier to lighten things up and distract people with something not horrible and art
Hmm.
not reflecting what's going on right now. If you're like in the dark somewhat, whatever. But also if you like are not in the dark, if you consciously just say, I'm not going there with, I'm not just going to be like full of rage because some asshole is making me feel that way. I can choose what I'm going to feel. And I can
Yeah.
help you to have a chuckle as well. Like there's no greed under the sea. There's no gunplay under the sea. What? He's talking about life under the sea? like a whole civilization instead of on the moon or on Mars under the sea. Okay, Octopus's Garden, just satire and just a bit of a laugh
Hmm.
as a way to cope, and hopefully, like my fans appreciate a bit of a laugh and a time that is a bit serious.
Absolutely, and that's what I like about your artistry, Ari, is those two sides and how they all kind of combine to be like the complete picture of you. I wanted to ask you, your producer Chris, seems like he's pretty integral part of the songwriting process. For 510, was there any other song that you brought in that was maybe in like a more like primordial form that really came together with his input in the studio? What was that process like?
They really all were, because I was kind of like high level saying I picture crows, and then we'd go outside with voice memos, and there's crows in the morning, like where I live, being so loud. Or
Hmm.
the two grunge songs that sound kind of like Nirvana outtakes from Bleach or Incesticide.
Yeah.
He knows the reference points intimately well, like I do. So I'd be like, it needs to be even more scary in this part, and have like an alarm sound, or uh, like I'll sing like Kurt Cobain when he was like not screaming but trying to sound tough, or
Yeah.
whatever. Um, and like he would know what to do to make the things I wanted actually become a reality sonically, instead of just these whimsical ideas that I was like, ooh, and this, and a helicopter, whatever. So I think whatever the song would have been, Ambulan, for example, like it's a trippy song about my past, you know, addiction adventures and misadventures. This one about Ambien and wine.
Hmm.
Uh, but he made it trippy. He had so much fun with it. I was like, it should be druggy, and so there's like a whole sequence of backwards guitar solos, and the way he mixed them up together and only had a few, and then in the middle of it he brought all of them up. I think he was just, yeah, like a massive part of this album and the last album, through his creative, fast and intelligent and intuitive way to bring to life what it is I'm trying to do. I can't imagine working with anybody else ever again.
Yeah, he has like such like pointed instincts, and especially in that song, because it does sort of like take on like a 2025 version of that sort of like retro sort of vocal group, like Life Is But a Dream, like where they turn the reverb on everything,
Hmm.
like those old vintage vocal recordings that make it sound so like dreamy and maybe like a little like stoned on something. uh
Mm.
there's a complete sort of like disassociation feeling that the music gives the listener in that particular song. Are there any so you said you had a show coming up. Are there any plans to do more performances for this record
Oh
or
yeah.
tour any?
And just one last thing about Chris, I wanted to
Yes.
sound like John Lennon vocally, and I always do. But on this album, I was very with intent about it, because some of the
Yes.
songs kind of just sound to me like solo Lennon or Wings. They just came out that way, and so he must have Googled, or he probably just knew what effects exactly John was using to have that telephony and that slapback, and what kind of speed slapback delay on the voice, and like he got it for me in the moments where I wanted them. And like the
Hmm.
last song, Alone in the Bar, has that Lennon thing in the middle, big middle part, very much. And I'm so happy, to sound like my biggest hero. But then on the intro and outro, I wanted to sound like the Strokes. And he got that done in seconds. He was like, well, Julian would have done here's the Strokes vocal thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and the slapback on like 30,000 Days, and especially my favorite songs, In My Dreams, the vocal effect on that, just like I kind of dreamed up my perfect idea of what it should be like, just straight from the brain, and he translated it to make it happen. So yeah, I'm just like, we're still unemployed. I'm like, let's start the new record. I keep saying that. Probably that'll become a reality in the next few weeks, because I don't like sitting around. And besides driving Uber and applying for jobs, I need to be hyperactive. And why not in
Of
another record?
course.
So, but as far as shows, there's yeah, I mean, if money was no object, the new album is performing the best according to Spotify for artists in Sweden and in Britain. So that'd be an amazing tour. But in
Oh,
reality,
nice.
we'll probably hit LA, but we've got a show at the Fireside in Alameda on April 25th. and then on May 21st at the Ivy Room in Berkeley, Oakland. It's a really
Hmm.
cool club, uh, like part Green Day owned, but it just sort of has like big league lights and big tall
Yeah.
stage, and it's just cool. Um, and yeah, that's it for now. But we've been not like I already resigned myself to being a studio band and
Hmm.
like making recordings that you couldn't replicate live anyway. And it sort of freed me to know that there is no band, and now there is a band. These two guys, Marky and Chris, that are really just hungry to play gigs as many as possible. They're all about it. They both sing harmonies, backups. They do it all, and
Hmm.
they love it. So now, yeah, like whatever I book, if they're free, I check with the venue. I get the tentative date. I check with them, and then if I confirm that date with them, I check with the club, and if it's still available, like I've done my entire life. But it's fun to do it again and know that there's not like an end to the gigs. This is just the beginning.
Yeah. That's a amazing, dude. Well, yeah, you thought you were in your like studio Sergeant Pepper's era. Then you've got bandmates who are like, no, gigs. And I relate to them because um, having done some gigs with a band lately, I forgot how much I missed it.
Mm.
Like I've been on stage as a comedian for years and years, but I haven't been on stage with a band in a while. So there was something to like when I felt very comfortable with the set list, and I like I'm old and I sweat a lot, so I wear a cap so that I don't get sweat in my eyes when I play.
Hmm.
Um, and I was just like really going for it. I was like spinning all around and like jumping up and down, like playing bass, and then like shouting at backing vocals at the crowd, and reminds you of why I started doing it, is chasing that feeling.
Yeah, it's a great rush. And I love your stand-up comedy, by the way. I was like, the way you were brushing up on my new album, I was brushing up by watching your YouTube clips, and you're a pro. It's really inspiring. Uh,
Oh, thank you, Ari. I really appreciate you saying that.
yeah, I mean, you're really funny, but the delivery and the stage presence and all of it just sort of speaks to your having done it for forever, and that makes me as an audience member laugh more readily because I'm not like, oh God, is he okay up there? Like he's got this. I'm just gonna laugh. Um,
Yeah.
so that's awesome. But well, like with live music, and I haven't tasted it for so long because the big reunion record release show is a week from tonight. But I'll remember immediately because it's the collaborative thing. You're like part of a gang. You're up there
Yeah.
together, and I couldn't have made the last two records if it wasn't collaborating with Chris Dunn. I just don't like being creative alone anymore. I just can't be
Hmm.
bothered. But if it's with somebody and like a writing partner, if you're writing screenplays, whatever, or a band up there at Kilowatt in San Francisco, like your guys, and you're rehearsing, it's almost like a play. You rehearse, and then the big show, and then afterwards there's this like feeling of like or when the record is finished, like sort of emptiness and sadness, like the rush is over, back to life, but also elation, like that's over and that went really well. And when's the next show? And so
Yeah.
always something's always booked into the future because nothing like playing live. Recordings are awesome, but you're like in the lab, like making something.
Yes.
But live, it can never be repeated just like that again. You don't know how it'll go. The audience is a huge factor, like how the bandmates and you were feeling that night, like all of it, how rehearsed you are, and it's like a blank entity, or like a wild card, whatever the word is, when you don't know exactly what it'll be like, and then it's captured, and and then immediately it's history. So you can't have it. Like one of my oil paintings, once somebody else owns it, I don't know if the children that I don't know were born like it or if they don't even notice it anymore. It's not mine anymore. And so it's
Hmm.
sort of same with a live gig. It belongs to the kids in the crowd.
Yeah. And that like that singular shared moment of community exists right then and there. Like we might be in a increasingly isolating society, I think, that we have in the United States. There are those moments where we feel like really connected. I had that recently in Japan at those Green Day shows. Like people that our lives could not be any more different, but we're together because we like this band, and they like I had like a special shirt that you could only get at one particular show. And they're like, oh, that looks so cool. It's like, oh, your shirt looks so cool.
Yeah.
uh or another cool thing that happened was uh there's this again, I'm not cool, I just found out about this song recently. There's this Japanese punk band from like the 90s called the Blue Hearts.
Hmm.
They have this very popular song called Linda Linda. and Billy Joe from Green Day goes on stage and he plays like just the first couple chords of it. Everybody in the crowd except me knows this song. And so everybody starts singing it back. And it's just very easy. It's just very simple. It's just Linda, 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 Linda. And then by the time of the second show, I knew it. I was ready.
Yeah, it's a really communal, celestial thing, music. And like all creative arts, but especially music, you can't measure it, but it's somewhere between
Yeah,
like awesome and disaster. No, it's like somewhere between here and God,
I
music
agree.
is. And you can't really point out why, you just feel it, and it's universal. I did a little tour of the Philippines, and they just go berserk over there about music, like
Cool.
in a way in the West that we can't understand. And I'm sure like Japan is also way more nutty. It's like they see it as this like otherworldly experience that's almost orgasmic that you can't get back again unless you're somehow together in a music venue with all these people. It's elation that can't really be repeated in any other setting. And it is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly communal. You're all connected, like the people in the queue to get the T-shirt, and anybody who is singing the song while walking down the street. Oh, I like your, Daniel Johnson shirt. It's like, music unites, and it's joyful, even if the music isn't happy. Like the Smiths. The Smiths fans love each other and have a hug.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why. Another reason music is so. I'm just so lucky to like be a musician.
No, I couldn't agree a few more. So Ari, the new record's called 510. Where can people go? It's I listened to it before I got on here. Where can people go to find out more about the Campbell apartment?
Well, it's 510 in parentheses, like an area code, because I always want. I was like, oh, this way I'll be the first title wise on all the lists because it's not even if it's alphabetical,
Because it's
I'll
a
be way before
number.
the A's. Way before the numbers and the A's. There's a parenthesis, but I thought that afterwards. So 510 in parentheses can be heard on all streaming services. I'm going to be pressing. There's a few journalists in Europe that are like, "Hey, where's the physical CD?" And I'm just like, "Well, you're the only two people that want one, but I'll press some." But other than that, it's like it's on Spotify and Amazon Music, Apple Music, Deezer, the gamut, the lot of them, and so is Bandcamp. I put everything I've done on Bandcamp, including the Pelicans, the other day, and people are just
Hmm.
buying it up because you pay what you want. And I was like, "Huh, this thing is still functioning." So yeah, all of those avenues, and this new album 510, it's under 30 minutes long, and so I'm proud of that too. Brevity is much better than long-windedness, I think.
Exactly. And I will be I will be concise in my intro. It's been really in my outro. It's been really nice chatting with you again, Ari. And good luck at the Kilowatt Show and at your next stand-ups gigs.
Thanks, mate. Really good to reconnect with you. I hope we do it a year from now, like we did a year ago today.
I look forward to it, Ari. Thank you.
Likewise.
Okay, folks, that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. The Campbell Apartment's new record is available everywhere you get your music. You can also check out them at the campbellapartment.bandcamp.com to check out that new record 510. If you enjoyed this podcast and think you know a friend that would be interested in listening to it as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That is links to everything related to me. You can also follow me on Instagram, willcarey23. I'm also Will Carey on Blue Sky. And if you want to go a little bit further in your support of the show, you can also check out our Patreon as well as our merch store available at awesomedisaster.com. We talked a lot about the two different sides of art, the political side and the entertainment side today. And while I firmly feel that my strengths are as an entertainer, I will continue to be dialed in. I refuse to let the world get me down, and I'm going to continue to better myself and to make things because making things brings me joy. And I'm at a time where I really need that. I feel like a lot of people need that. Perhaps you can relate to this as well. So if it's music, if it's art, if it's model trains, if it is stamp collecting, I want that for you. So if you have something that is bringing you joy, I would love to hear what it is, because maybe I could find another rabbit hole to dive into. So thank you all again so much for being here, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.